Hello everyone, DM Gashbad here, and this is it. We are finally here. This is the final game in the Deathfang Valley campaign. It's going to be round 6, so after 5 rounds, a whole bunch of games, about a year in the making, a new Vampire Count's army, added a bunch of stuff. We are finally here. It's the big multiplayer game at the very end. So again, if you're just joining us, this is all going to be a little bit confusing, but this has been an escalation campaign for Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition. The custom scenario that we are using this round is called Places of Power. So first off, obviously, this is going to be a multiplayer game. This is going to be using the Triumph and Treachery rules. For those of you who may not be aware, there's actually 2 different sets of multiplayer rules for Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition. One came in the big red rule book, so not the little book that you get with the starter set or anything like that. You have to buy the really big rule book in order to get these rules. They're very, very different. Triumph and Treachery is a little bit more crazy. You got like the cards, it's a little bit more abstracted. You can only fight one opponent at a time in any given round. Yeah, like I said, you've got all these cards that do kind of these crazy things. There's a lot of interactions. The other rules are a lot more straightforward. They're for fighting like a more traditional Warhammer Fantasy battle, just with extra players. So you can have 3-way combats, you can have spells or artillery that target more than one group. It's hard to say which is better. I think maybe I kind of like the big red rulebook rules a little bit better. It's just a little less abstracted, maybe a little less random. A lot of people love Triumph and Treachery, and I can understand it. It's just a different way of playing the game, and, you know, to each their own. But if you haven't tried one, you know, try the other, because I do like multiplayer games, although they are kind of a lot of work. Anyway, this is a custom scenario created by a member of the group who set up this whole campaign, so thanks to him for that. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to be playing on a 6x4 foot table. So we've upgraded, you know, our armies have gotten a little bit bigger. We're playing at 1,000 points plus our 250 point or so monster, and there's going to be all 3 of us on the table at the same time. The big news is that we're going to each roll a d6 for number of pieces of terrain. We'll get to that in a minute. As far as deployment goes, one player is going to be on a short edge, and the 2 other players are going to be on kind of like the opposite end of the long edges. The next most important thing about this scenario is that we're not actually using the pay chest, you know, the coins to determine who's the winner for this scenario. Instead, there are these little objective tokens that we call them places of power. So there are these, on the game board, there'll be these little clear gems, little crystal kind of things. And those are the places of power. Those are the objectives that we want to control. You control one of these by being the closest unit within 3 inches. If you are the player that controls one of these stones at the end of each player turn, not each game turn, so there's 6 game turns in this game, so there's going to be a total of 18 player turns, you're going to get 1 victory point. And the person with the most victory points wins. There's 4 of these places of power. The one sort of in the center off to the left is going to be the big one. That's actually worth 2 victory points if you're controlling it at the end of each player turn, so you build up a lot of victory points that way. And then there's one sort of up from that, there's one down from that, and there's one to the right from that. So there's 3 other smaller power stones. And nothing else matters. You don't collect victory points in any way during this game. You don't. The pay chest doesn't matter. This is the only thing that determines who is the winner of this game and who is the winner of the campaign. Person who wins this game wins the campaign. Finally, there are special rewards for when you move a unit within 3 inches of one of these stones. So when you move your unit within 3 inches of stones, the first time they do that, they roll on a chart and they get a little bonus. So on a 1 or 2, they get +1 power die or dispel die in the magic phase. And then 3 through 4, the unit improves its ward save by 1 to a maximum of 3+. If it doesn't have ward save, it gets 6+ ward save. And on a 5 or 6, it gets a +1 to hit with all attack rolls. So these are kind of nice. They're not game-breaking, but they can make kind of a big deal. Extra dispels are nice. Ward saves can be very good. And of course, depending on what unit comes within 3 inches, +1 to hit is also very good. So hopefully that's clear. Let's go on to the table layout and I'll go over the terrain. So right off the bat, D6 pieces of terrain per player was probably too much, and the reason being is because we rolled a 6, a 6, and a 5 for 17 pieces of terrain, so this is an absolutely stuffed table. There is so much terrain here, it has absolutely choked the whole area, and plus we decided to clump most of it around those power stones, those objectives, to try and make it as difficult for our opponents as possible to get to. So you'll see here real quick. So here's a picture of the table. Let's go over this stuff real fast. So over on the left, we have 2 mysterious forests. Those are actually going to play a part in this game. Then we got a little line of obstacles. Those are actually blessed bulwarks. There's a little grassy, square with a little circle on top. That's a weirding well, so that's the kind of thing that a character can drink from and gain some benefits. Then we have another mysterious forest. We have even more blessed bulwarks. Those are those hedges. We've started to run out of my normal obstacles, so we've got to kind of improvise here. And that tower up on the top, I'm just kind of going clockwise around the table. So that gray tower there is a tower of blood. So that is the building that gives everyone inside and within so many inches frenzy. So off past the Tower of Blood over to the right, we have some more of those Blessed Bulwarks. We have 2 normal forests, and way off in the upper right, we have a mist-wreathed swamp. No one really wanted to deal with that, so we stuck it in the corner. Down from that, we have some blazing barricades. So those are the fiery hit obstacles. No one really wanted to deal with those either, so we tucked them off onto the far right-hand side of the board, where we're almost certainly not going to be messing around with them. We have an ordinary hill off in the way lower right, then an ordinary building. We got a couple more walls, and then we have a Grail Chapel. That's that ruined church-like building down towards the bottom. After that, we have another wall section, and in front of that big swamp area is Khemri and Quicksand. So in addition to the normal terrible rules for marshes, Khemri and Quicksand is the one where if a monstrous infantry, or monstrous cavalry model fails its dangerous terrain test for moving into it, it's just removed as a casualty. It's just straight up gone. So off to the left of that Khemri and Quicksand is another ordinary building, and above that is an altar of Cain. So another thing that hands out frenzy to nearby troops. You've got a little wall section, and that's about it. Okay, yeah, that's a lot of stuff. So the big power stone is right to the right of the altar of Cain. That's that big throne of graves that I've got kind of in the middle of the table. Then you've got a couple lesser power stones. You've got one above the altar of Cain, one below the altar of Cain, right in front of that building with the tan roof, and then you've got another one that's sitting right in front of that hedge by the Tower of Blood. So those are our objectives. That's where we want to get. We're all deployed at this point, and it's an interesting choice. So the person who deploys on the short table edge is really close to all the objectives. They're closer than the other players. I think the idea being that they were more likely to be uncontested. Like the other ones are kind of right across from each other, so the thinking being that they would start fighting each other. I don't think that's the way it worked out. Basically, what happened is the person in that short table edge deployment zone is kind of in a lot of trouble. First off, everyone's going to be heading towards that person, so I actually think they're going to take more hits than anyone else. Also, we knew that was the closest route, so we really piled up a lot of terrain in between that deployment area and the objectives. And of course, because they can't catch a break, the Khemri and Tomb Kings are the ones that ended up in that deployment zone, so they might have a rough job in front of them. The Orcs and Goblins, or I should say the Goblins, have deployed up in the top right, and my good old Angels of Morr vampire counts, we are in the bottom right. So here's a picture of my final army for this campaign, and I know if you've been watching these battle reports for like this last year, you're probably really tired of me saying this, but I didn't get all my painting done. I had this idea, I wanted to introduce a vampire at this points level, but it didn't get done. The good news is that I finally did get my zombies. Let's start off to the left. That is a unit of 20 zombies. Now, I didn't actually get the full unit that I wanted to have painted. I wanted to have these nice new Revenant zombies that were all like betrayed men. They've all been murdered or betrayed by their friends in some ways. Anyway, I'll probably go into this army at a later time, really, show how it grew and what I did. But that's for another time. In the meantime, I had 15 of the new Revenants painted, and then in the back rank, I have 5 really, really old zombies, just really old metal models. I've been trying to get enough of these guys to turn into a full unit, and I haven't been able to do it yet. They're really expensive, like on eBay for some reason. But anyway, they're one of the first models that I had painted. But I do have a full painted unit of zombies ready to play in this game. And then I needed to make up some points because, you know, I didn't get as many zombies that I wanted. I didn't get my vampire. So I went back and I took some bat swarms. So I got 2 bat swarms, painted these up for Warhammer Quest. Now I'm going to use them in this game here. And then the good old reliable stone guardians, the crypt horrors. Those guys, I got 3 of them. They're off to the right. And of course I haven't expanded my skeletons, but I've still got 11 skeletons. That's my necromancer bunker right there. So they've got a champion and a musician. So like I said, I had to fill out some points for this last game, and one of the ways that I did that was that I made my corpse cart a necromancer on a corpse cart. So that is a level 1 necromancer with invocation of Nehek on that corpse cart. And part of the situation in this campaign is that throughout the campaign you get lore points for doing various things, for having painted armies, for winning games, so on and so forth. So you get to spend these lore points on magic items. And if I had just taken my necromancer, I would have had trouble actually spending enough of these lore points because I don't have many standards, can't use the magic standards, and I just, yeah, there's not a lot of characters in the army to put magic items on. So new Mr. Necromancer on the corpse cart gets a Dragonbane gem because everyone's going to have like ruby rings and that kind of thing. There's going to be lots of fireballs flying around, so I thought that might keep him a little bit safe. Up in front is Mr. Grimm. He gets nothing because he can't have nothing. That's my Karen Wraith. And then I bumped my Necromancer level 2 up to a Master Necromancer. So I'm Lord level now. I got my Master Necromancer. Only put him at a level 3. I thought level 4 might be kind of excessive. I spent a bunch of my lore points on magic items for this guy. He's got the Ruby Ring of Ruin, of course. I gave him an Earthing Rod so I can reroll a miscast if I have to. And I got Talisman of Endurance for a 5-up ward save, more protection for my the guy that's keeping my army together. And I gave him the Master of the Dead upgrade. Man, I wish I'd known about this earlier. It's just this option in the rulebook that I just kept skipping over, never really noticed. And so for like 25 points, you can put it on a Necromancer, and it allows them to increase the size of skeleton units past the starting size. So that could have been really handy because I always take Invocation of Nehek, but in the early rounds, there's not really much to do because you haven't taken any casualties. Couldn't do it from the very beginning because I'd be over my points allowance for heroes, but if I'd taken it in one of the later rounds, I could have been casting Invocation of Nehek and really bumping up the size of, say, those skeletons, that skeleton bunker unit, and made better use of my power dice in those early rounds. So anyway, I finally noticed this. I grabbed that right away, and so I'm pretty happy about that. As far as spells go, he gets Invocation of Nehek, a Gaze of Nagash, and I believe Curse of Years. But moving on, to the right we have 24 Crypt Ghouls with Aghast, we have Meatloaf the Terrorgeist with Rancid Maw and Infestation, and then finally we have my 2 Fellbats, Bunny and Kindling. So here's how I deployed on that long table edge. I kind of flipped the view to get a better shot of these guys. The Crypt Horrors are up in front. They're the closest to those places of power. This Grail Chapel is kind of in my way. I can't deploy in that because it's past my deployment zone, so I just kind of got to move around it with all my guys. The Crypt Ghouls are right behind the Horrors. Bunny and Kindling are to the side of them. I've got my Master Necromancer in his good old trusty skeleton bunker right behind the Ghouls, as always. The Zombies have Mr. Grimm inside those guys, and they're ready to move towards the center of the board. I plan on moving left, well, I guess right from this picture, but when we start playing, I'm going to be on the other side of the table. So anyway, I'm going to be moving in the direction of the Crypt Horrors as much as possible. I don't really want to get bogged down in a combat with the Orcs and Goblins. I want to move towards the objectives. So anyway, the Necromancer on the corpse cart is by the Zombies, and then way out in back, I've got my Terrorgeist and the Fellbats ready to flap around and start causing problems, hopefully away from the attention of the bulk of the other 2 armies. Speaking of the other 2 armies, here is the Tomb Kings on that short table edge. Off to the left, he has 26 skeletons with full command. Then a little bit further right, he has 10 skeleton archers. He has got his Lich Priest in that unit. He is a level 2 with the Ruby Ring. I believe for this game, he rolled up the Incantation of Urgency, which lets people move, and the Incantation of Protection, which gives him a 5-up ward. Then we have the big Necrosphinx in the center, and we have a new unit. We have Tomb Guard. We have a unit of 25 Tomb Guard with full command, and the standard of the Undying Legion, so they get to regrow troops in the magic phase as a bound spell. Then we have 3 Chariots with full command, and tunneling under the battlefield we have 3 Tomb Swarms and a Tomb Scorpion. And look at this nonsense right here. This is the Orc and Goblin player. So, real quick, To the left, we have 12 squigs and 6 herders in a unit there. Then that big purple worm is actually a great spined horror from the Storm of Magic supplement. It has the mark of Slaanesh, so it gets always strikes first. And then that giant black blob in the center of the deployment zone are 79 Night Goblin Spearmen. They have full command and nets. And then we have a full rank of Goblin characters. We have Captain Jackpot. He is the Goblin War Boss. He is equipped with a great weapon and the Amulet of Protection. We have a Goblin Big Boss Battle Standard Bearer with the Spider Banner, so the whole unit gets poison attacks. There is another War Boss, a Night Goblin War Boss, tucked in that unit. And I believe about 5 Night Goblin Big Bosses armed with different things. Some have shields, a lot of them have great weapons. I know one of them has the Warrior Bane, so just a super cheap magic weapon that I'm sure he put in there so that he could go attack my Wraith if he needed to. And then off to the right we have 12 squigs and 6 squig herders. So that is a classic all your eggs in one basket. It is a great big scary unit, but man, this terrain has got to be a little bit concerning. It is going to be a bear to maneuver. That took a long time. So, we are on to the first turn. So, of course, in Triumph and Treachery, you draw cards to find out who takes the first player turn in any given game turn. So, round 1, turn 1 goes to the Orcs and Goblins. They draw their thing, and they immediately play a Triumph and Treachery card called Surprise Attack. So, they get 3 inches to their basic move this first round. The Spined Horror takes the lead. It goes immediately towards that lesser place of power, that Power Stone over on the left there. You can kind of see above its big spiny maw. Anyway, moving through that forest, we have discovered that that is a Venom Thicket. So anything moving through that thing has to take a dangerous terrain test. Now, that giant Goblin unit was all set to go straight through there and kind of claim the center of the board. And then we found out that that's that Venom Thicket, and so that whole plan has to go out the window. Because if he moves that Goblin unit through there, he's going to take a couple wounds on those characters, which is going to kind of hurt over time, and he's going to lose about 13 Night Goblins a round. So every time he goes through there, that's going to cause a ton of damage, and my opponent has decided that that is a level of attrition that even Goblins aren't comfortable with. So they have to wheel off to the right. So kind of bad luck for the Goblin commander. That plan has suddenly caused him a lot of problems. The Squigs have moved around the Weirding Well, and so they're off trying to support the Great Spined Horror, and the other squigs are moving up along with the redirected giant Night Goblin unit. When the Spined Horror moves within 3 inches of that little place of power, it goes and rolls up the +1 to hit, so that thing has just become even more dangerous than it already was. And this Goblin army has no magic and no shooting, so we are straight on to the next player, which is going to be the Tomb Kings. They draw their card next. Now, this turn order kind of matters in this first round. So the player that goes first gets to get, he's going to get 1 point for being by one of those places of power, and no one can do anything about that. And then the second player, they're going to get points for any of these places of power that they move next to, and the first player is also going to get points again. And so the third player is kind of on the back foot, like right from the very beginning. And guess what? That's going to be me. But anyway, here's the Tomb Kings. Off on the right, the Tomb Guard and the Chariot start stumbling through that mysterious forest over there. They discover that that is an abyssal wood, so that's not going to affect them, but the Chariots are having a little bit of difficulty moving around the Tomb Guard. They've got to kind of shuffle around, and they're just having a little bit of a tough time. The Necrosphinx did decide to go for a bit of glory and go for a charge on that Spined Horror right off the bat. It failed the charge, though, so it only stumbles forward a short distance. And off on the left, we have discovered another Venom Thicket. So this is, first off, this is just a really crowded place to have a battle in, and it's completely poisonous. So this is just a miserable place. No wonder no one has grabbed up these places of power before this time. The archers moving through the Venom Thicket, they're going to go ahead and they're going to lose one of their guys as they cross through. And more importantly, the Hierophant, the Lich Priest, goes and takes a wound too, fails his regen save, and that's rough. So there's no way for a Tomb King player to put wounds back on his characters. So now this guy is, throughout this game, going to be down 1 wound, which means that miscast, something getting thrown into hand-to-hand combat with this guy, he's really vulnerable. And the skeletons moving through that Venom Thicket don't do any better. They lose 5 guys themselves. So far, the most lethal thing in this game has definitely been the trees. So for the first magic phase of any consequence, the Tomb Kings go and roll a double 6, and they declare that their opponent is going to be the Orcs and Goblins. So right off the bat, they're going to cast the Ruby Ring of Ruin on that Great Spined Horror, and they're going to put 1 wound on that. Then the Lich Priest is going to go and cast the Incantation of Urgency. It's going to affect, looks like everybody, so they're going to go for a big version. So everyone's going to get some movement forward, which is going to help a little bit. So the Chariots move off, the Tomb Guard move forward. There is a discussion as to whether or not the Necrosphinx would be affected by this, because it had already failed to charge this round, so normally you don't get to move any further, but the wording of this was really unclear. I mean, there's no other reason why it couldn't move, so we ended up rolling a d6 for it and decided that the Necrosphinx could actually move in this magic phase. So he goes and he trots forward, and he's going to claim that Power Stone right there. That's the big one, so that's going to be a mighty 2 victory points that the Tomb Kings are going to claim. The skeletons on the left are going to move into that building. 4 more of them are going to die as they move through the venom thicket. You know, more poisonous spiders come out and bite their skulls off. But because they have been affected by an augment spell of the Khemrian lore, they get to a couple of them get raised back. So 3 more come back. So they only lose a total of 1, which isn't great, but that's not so terrible. Anyway, the archers move up to that wall, and the one guy that they lost in the venom thicket also comes back. And then the Lich Priest goes and casts the Incantation of Protection. So it's going to give everyone a 5-up ward save. But he casts it with Irresistible Force. So first the good news, everyone gets a 5-up ward save. 3 more skeletons return that were lost, the ones that are currently in the building, who also are in control of one of those places of power, those power stones. But then the Lich Priest explodes. So he detonates. 3 archers die. He's going to take a single hit. And remember, he has 1 wound remaining. So that is going to wound him, but he has a 5-up ward save because of that spell that he just cast. He does thankfully make that ward save, so the priest is okay, but really we were looking at that Lich Priest potentially killing himself in the first round of the game, by bonking his head into a poisonous tree and then blowing himself up with like the 3rd spell that he's cast. Anyway, it doesn't happen. He is still looking kind of vulnerable. He did blow up a couple of his guys. These venom thickets, man, they're really taking a toll. But anyway, they are moving forward. So finally it is my turn, and I am feeling really behind. So Mr. Grimm goes and leaves the zombie unit and goes to claim that Power Stone there. I gotta get some points somewhere, because these guys, the Orcs and Goblins, are claiming 1 point a round, and they've already got 2. The Tomb Kings are claiming 3 points a round, and they've already gotten 3, so I'm behind. I need to catch up. So Mr. Grimm goes to the center of the table right by that Tower of Blood, which isn't a great idea, because now he is frenzied because he's of the Forces of Destruction. The zombies kind of hang out where they are. Most everything else shuffles off to the left. So we're getting led by the horrors. The Fellbats are hanging back. The Terrorgeist goes and leaps over everybody and goes and hangs out between the Crypt Horrors and the Crypt Ghouls. And the Necromancer on the Corpse Cart just kind of shuffles along at the back. So it is my magic phase, and I get to find out what Master of the Dead does. It does great stuff. So I have grown a total of 7 skeletons and 15 zombies. I would have been able to grow even more of these guys, but I actually ran out of space. So my corpse cart and the 2 units, the zombies and the skeletons, started getting in each other's way. And so I ran out of places to put models. So I grew them as much as I could. You see that I don't actually have that many undead models, so unfortunately we had to murder a bunch of my Empire soldiers, and they are now the freshly dead in the back ranks of those guys. But anyway, that was really cool. I enjoyed doing that. That's all I did for my magic phase, but it looks impressive. And Meatloaf the Terrorgeist goes and screams at those skeletons in the building. I want to clear those guys out so I can claim that Power Stone. He rolls really badly and only kills 2 of them. So it is round 2, and we go and we take our cards and we randomly determine who's going to take the first player turn in round 2, and it is going to be the Tomb King. So cool. First thing that happens is the Necrosphinx goes and declares a charge against the Great Spined Horror. So these two are going to have a big rematch. They had just an epic brawl in the last game round where they just beat the stuffing out of each other for a long time. So they're going to go and do that again. Necrosphinx charge in against the Great Purple Monster. And to help out, the Tomb Scorpion arrives. So it's round 2, so we get to see if the Tunnelers have arrived. The Tomb Swarms don't, but the Tomb Scorpion shows up right by that Spined Horror in the center of the table, ready to cause problems. In further moves, the Tomb Guard and the Chariots continue to advance on the right, and the Lich Priest actually leaves the Archer unit, feeling a little bit exposed right there, and he goes and joins the Skeleton in that building off by where my guys are headed. So it is the magic phase now, and I am a jerk. I have a bunch of these Triumph and Treachery cards that I start using against the Tomb Kings. So first thing I do is I use the Duplicitous Mage card, which prevents the Lich Priest from casting any spells this round. So that's a drag. And then he goes and uses the Ruby Ring, and I use the Trickster's Ring. So it was a fake Ruby Ring. It didn't really work, and so it miscasts on any double. So he uses the Ruby Ring, he does get a double, so that thing's going to be disabled for the rest of the game. He fires it at the Terrorgeist, for being such a jerk, I kind of deserve it. He fails to hurt it, though. The Archers shoot at the Terrorgeist as well, they don't do any damage to him, and the Chariots can't really shoot at anybody because I am the enemy in the shooting phase, and the Chariots aren't anywhere near my guys. In the close combat phase, the Orcs and Goblins are the Tomb King's enemy, and so we go into the fight with the Necrosphinx and the Great Spined Horror. They each cause 1 wound to each other, which is probably about what you'd expect. So the Spined Horror has lost the combat, it's down by 1, has to make a break test. Its leadership is not fantastic, but he does manage to pass it, and that's really key. So I go and draw my card, so I'm going to get the next player turn. So first thing that happens is Mr. Grimm is going to go and charge into that Tomb Scorpion, which he has to do because he is right next to that Tower of Blood. He's within 6 inches, so he is actually frenzied. The Tomb Scorpion is actually not frenzied because the Tomb Kings aren't forces of destruction, they're neutral, and so he has hatred instead. The Crypt Horrors go and charge the Skeletons and Lich Priest in that building, so obviously I've declared the Tomb Kings as my opponent in the movement phase. And the rest of the undead just kind of continue to shuffle around. These big buildings in the middle are kind of, well, they're super in my way. I'm not really sure about how to get these guys where I want them to go. I'm moving the Crypt Ghouls up to try and help out the Crypt Horrors. I think they've got a better shot at tearing those skeletons apart. The skeletons are moving behind my Crypt Ghouls, so they're just all jammed up. I don't want them in that building because I don't want to get charged by like a 100-man Goblin unit. Same thing with the zombies. I'm just kind of holding back. I don't want to stick my face in front of that giant meat grinder that's coming up my right flank, and the corpse cart is just sort of puttering around. I do, in the magic phase, grow 5 more zombies, but my magic doesn't do anything else. My blasty spells are dispelled. The Terrorgeist does a little bit better this round and screams off 7 skeletons from that main building. And here we have the Tomb Scorpion versus Wraith combat. Now this is not fair in any way, shape, or form because the Tomb Scorpion can't hurt the Wraith at all. So the Wraith is going to go ahead and put 1 wound on the Tomb Scorpion, so it crumbles 1 more because of losing the combat. It would lose by 2, so it would normally take 2 wounds, but it is an undead construct, so it crumbles 1 less, so it only crumbles 1 wound. Anyway, it's down 2 wounds, it's really, really hurt. And then to really pile on the damage on the Tomb King's player, the Horrors just go crazy and just tear apart 6 skeletons. They take absolutely no wounds back, so 6 more crumble. So then they've just got 1 skeleton and the wounded Lich Priest left in that building with absolutely no help anywhere nearby. So the Tomb King's player's in a lot of trouble. I'm going to take his general off the board real soon, and we'll see what he can do after that. So here we have the Orc and Goblin player. He's going to round out this round 2. The Squigs are going to declare charge on the Tomb King chariots, but they're a little bit too far away and fail that charge. And that giant Night Goblin unit goes and moves into the Tower of Blood. It might have a really nice basement, or maybe a whole dungeon underneath that thing to fit that many goblins. Right, well, they're goblins. They just stack up on top of each other. Anyway, the whole crowd goes and moves into the Tower of Blood. So they're going to try and get around all this terrain, by building hopping. We'll see how that works for them. The Squigs on the right just advance a little bit. I don't have a picture of this, but in the close combat phase, the Necrosphinx is going to cause 2 wounds on the Spined Horror. The Spined Horror is just going to cause 1 wound on the Necrosphinx, so the Spined Horror is getting really beat up here, but it does pass its break test again, so this fight continues. So we're on to round 3. We draw cards, and I get to go first this round, and boy, that's really bad news for the Tomb Kings. So I immediately declare a charge with the Crypt Horrors on that building. They're doing such a great job. They don't need the help from the Crypt Ghouls. We're going to give the glory to them for finishing off this kind of important unit on my opponent's half. Unfortunately, the rest of my troops just keep muddling around. You can see I'm moving my Terrorgeist around just to the left, but everyone else is just kind of hanging out, not really knowing what to do. The Crypt Ghouls are still staying by in case they're needed in that building. I don't know what I'm doing with them. I don't want to move through that swamp, but I should have moved towards the center of the table because they're not achieving anything significant here. Anyway, and of course my skeletons are trapped behind them. I don't want them in that building, and the zombies don't really want to stand in front of the squigs. They've moved up behind that wall, which is fine, but just kind of trapped in my deployment zone a little bit, trapped by terrain and indecision. The only thing that's really gone and done something significant is my fellbats. My fellbats have decided that they've got a sneaky maneuver here. They're going to go flap their way in front of the Tower of Blood, meaning that that giant Night Goblin unit is stuck. They can't come out from that side because my guys are in the way. However, did you notice my mistake? This is a really big, dumb mistake. I forgot that that's a Tower of Blood. I should know because, you know, my Cairn Wraith just got affected by that. But basically, I'm going to trap them for one round, and then those bats are frenzied with just a miserable leadership. So they're almost certainly going to declare a charge on the Tower of Blood and get torn apart by the, like, dozen Goblin heroes in there. So that was really stupid. It would have been really easy for me to take those guys, you know, block off that Tower of Blood and just turn them around, turn them a different direction, back towards my lines. They won't have to charge anything because there's no bad guys back there. You know, just a simple change would have helped that out a lot. So in the shooting phase, I'm feeling pretty confident about my Crypt Horror's chances, so I go off to the Skeleton Archers, and I scream 4 of those guys away. In the close combat phase, the Wraith manages to kill off the Tomb Scorpion. Good job, Mr. Grimm. And sadly, yet predictably, the Crypt Horrors managed to kill the remaining skeleton and the Lich Priest and move into the building to control that little place of power right there. So that means my opponent's army starts falling apart, which is bad news. So those are the Skeleton Archers. 3 more of those guys turn to dust. There's only 1 remaining. 3 Tomb Guard fall apart, which definitely doesn't help. The Necrosphinx manages to crumble itself 1 more, and everything else, well, I guess it's just the Chariots at this point, but the Chariots manage to pass their leadership test and don't take any further wounds. And because my opponent cannot catch a break in any way, it is now the Orc and Goblin phase. So, first thing first, these squigs are going to charge into the Chariots. In the movement phase, a lone Night Goblin Big Boss leaves the tower and is pointed suspiciously at Mr. Grimm. I'm just kind of wondering, I kind of think like maybe that's the one with the magic weapon. No magic, no shooting, so straight on to close combat. Yeah, the squigs just eat all the chariots. They just devour the whole thing, even the wheels. So they only lose 1 squig in the process, but that, yeah, the Tomb Kings are having a tough time. And the squigs are now claiming that place of power as well, so that's more points for them. And to round off a really terrible turn for the mummies, the Spined Horde just goes and takes the last 2 wounds off of the Necrosphinx. And so, yeah, my opponent's, the Tomb King's left flank is gone, their right flank is gone. It's looking rough. And so finally the Tomb Kings get their turn. So right off the bat, everyone takes more crumble tests, and the archers disappear. 4 more Tomb Guard crumble, but they spitefully declare me as their opponent in the movement phase and charge Mr. Grimm. I'm really kind of bummed about this because I think that the Orcs and Goblins are in a stronger position. They've certainly built up more victory points. You know, I don't want to say that, you know, the Tomb Kings are taking vengeance on me for killing off their Lich Priest or something like that, but I feel like these guys might be becoming a little bit of a kingmaker here, because this is going to take away like a lot of my scoring opportunities here, and it doesn't help. They were sitting right in front of that Great Spined Horror, which really kind of needs to go. But it's also really tough. It'd eat a lot of Tomb Guard, so this might have been a safer charge. Yeah, it's feeling a little personal. So the Tomb Swarms arrive in this round, and they line up right on the flank of my Terrorgeist. In the magic phase, he manages to use the Banner of the Undying Legion to grow 3 back in the Tomb Guard unit. It was cast with Irresistible Force, so he's not going to be able to use that again, but it does help. And in the close combat phase, poor brave Mr. Grimm gets stomped, and he's forced to crumble away into nothing. He doesn't even manage to kill anything on his way out, which is a real drag. But anyway, the Tomb Guard go and overrun into my Fellbats, which, you know, on the one hand, that's kind of a shame. On the other hand, you know, it saves me the embarrassment of charging that Tower of Blood in my turn. So at least there's that. So it is a new game turn. It is turn number 4, and so we draw our cards, and the Orcs and Goblins are going to get the first player turn in this round. So the first thing that's going to happen is the squigs over on the right are going to charge into my now massive unit of zombies. Look at that, there's 40 zombies in there. I'm still thinking that those squigs are probably going to eat them all, but wow, I've made a lot. It's going to be a pretty good fight. And the time is now. The goblins have left the Tower of Blood. So the one goblin with the magic weapon, now he doesn't really have much to do because the Wraith is gone, so he kind of shuffles off down a little bit, and the big unit leaves the Tower of Blood. Moving out in this formation, 5 goblins die to the poisonous things as they kind of nick the edge of that forest. So here we have the infamous squigs versus zombies fight, and I decide that I need to save my zombies. I do not need rampaging squigs going around eating my necromancers. So I kind of burn a bunch of my Triumph and Treachery cards. First, I go and play Gas Bomb, so the squigs are disrupted, so they don't get to count their rank bonuses. And then I go and play Secret Info, which means that the zombies are +1 weapon skill. Now that doesn't make much of a difference. The zombies just go up to weapon skill 2. But it does mean that now the zombies are hitting the squigs on 4s rather than 5s, and that might actually make a difference because the zombies actually do go and pull down 3 squigs. Now, that said, between the squigs' big teeth and the crumbling that happens later, they kill 30 zombies, so that's definitely taken like most of that unit off the table, but it could have been a lot worse. So I think those cards probably did save that zombie unit because it wouldn't have taken much, either different luck or different rolls for this unit to just, this 40 strong unit to just disappear immediately. So anyway, we're all stuck in combat now, and so we'll see what I can make of it. Unfortunately, the Tomb Kings go next, and I say unfortunately because that means that previously those Tomb Swarms appeared in the flank of my Terrorgeist, and if I had gone first, that Terrorgeist would have just flapped away and been in no danger whatsoever, but because the Tomb Kings went first, they get to charge me in the flank, which is what killed it in my last game, so that's a drag. Unfortunately, nothing crumbles away, so in the close combat phase, I try and save my Terrorgeist. So I play the Triumph and Treachery card, Ancient Enmity, which means that in the close combat phase, the Tomb King player has to choose a different enemy. And in response, the Goblin player goes and plays Paranoia, which means that the Tomb King player has to choose a different enemy. So then it's right back to me, so that's kind of a bummer. Anyway, the Tomb Guard go and kill off my Fellbats, don't take any damage, and they reform back towards that lone Goblin. The swarms do pretty well here, and they cause 4 wounds on the Terrorgeist, which definitely hurts. In return, the Terrorgeist does pretty well itself. It's going to put 7 wounds on the swarms, and they take an extra wound from the crumble. So, yeah, he's probably going to die next round, but he's going to put a big hole in these tomb swarms on his way out. So it is my turn finally, and I am going to declare the Goblin player as my enemy. So I'm going to try and save the zombies. Operation Save Zombies is now in effect. So the Bat Swarms, remember those guys? They've just slowly been flapping their way around that building off to the right. They're going to charge the flank of the Squig, which is cool because that's going to give them Always Strikes Last. And the Corpse Cart is going to charge in there at the front, and these Squigs do not like impact hits, so hopefully that'll cause them a lot of problems. Things are feeling a little bit safer now, so my Skeleton Bunker, now that they're like huge, goes and enters the building with my Master Necromancer. And the ghouls just painfully, slowly advance. They're moving their way across that wall and up to the Khemrian quicksand. So in the magic phase, I get to grow some more stuff. I'm going to grow 7 more zombies and a couple more skeletons. And then in the close combat phase, yeah, the cavalry has arrived, so all the squigs die. So this whole unit is gone. We munch all those dudes. The squigs do manage to kill 3 zombies on their way out. The bat swarms are going to overrun, so yeah. Zombies are safe. Everyone can breathe a little easier. So it is round 5, and we go to the cards, and we find out the Tomb Kings are going to go first. Right off the bat, 1 Tomb Guard is going to crumble away. And then they go and charge that little jerk goblin that was bravely wandering around on his own with his Warrior Bane sword. However, they do clip the Khemrian quicksand, and I guess these Tomb Guard don't get outside in their homeland very much, because one of them does sink into the marsh and disappear on their charge. Anyway, in the close combat phase, the Goblin Big Boss does manage to kill one of the Tomb Guard, and then he's just chopped to pieces. So he's dead, and the Tomb Guard overrun into the flank of that giant Goblin unit. The Tomb Swarms, by the way, if you're curious, because I chose the Orc and Goblin player as my opponent in the close combat phase in my turn, the Tomb Swarms actually disengaged from the Terrorgeist. So in this new round, they weren't able to charge because the opponent was the Orc and Goblin player, and so they're not in combat with my Terrorgeist right now, so he's doing okay. So next is my turn, and there's some general shuffling around. The Tomb King player goes and plays a Triumph Treachery card to prevent the ghouls from marching, because at this point I really need to start making some points. And again, I'm feeling like someone there is a little bit mad at me and is preventing me from doing that. So anyway, the ghouls can't march, which means they don't take casualties from that Khemri and quicksand, but it means they don't get to where I can score points. The horrors are absolutely happy where they are, getting their points from the house and that power stone next to them. The Terrorgeist braves the venom thicket, even though he's really hurt, to move forward to scream at some stuff. And the zombies and the corpse cart amble around on the right. In the magic phase, the Ruby Ring of Ruin cast from that house goes and takes the last wound off of the Great Spined Horror, and that thing dies, and that's making me breathe a little bit easier. And an Irresistible Gaze of Nagash goes and kills 2 squigs and 3 herders over on the remaining unit. So I go and I blow up a little bit. I lose some power dice, and 2 skeletons go and get vaporized, but my Necromancer is actually unhurt, and so we move on. We're on to the Orc and Goblin phase. There's not really a ton to do because all of his units are either dead or claiming some of those power stones. So we go straight on to the close combat phase, which is the big fight between the Tomb Guard and that giant unit of Night Goblins. So the Tomb Guard are going, and they're gonna make a valiant last stand. So they play Inspire Fury, which gives those Tomb Guard +1 strength, and they use Cunning Ruse, which gives them +1 initiative. The Night Goblins go and net them, so that's rough. That means that they are now up a strength and down a strength. But they are fighting all characters in that front rank, so they're kind of having a tough time. They do go and strike with a killing blow on the Night Goblin War Boss, which just kills him right off the bat, which is kind of cool. They do manage to wound one other big boss, and then they just get annihilated. It's just bad things. Anyway, all the Tomb Guard are gone, so now the Tomb King player only has the Tomb Swarms left. So it is round 6, last round of the game, last round of this whole campaign, and we're all trying to grab points where we can. So the goblins go first in this one, and one of the goblin big bosses leaves that giant unit just to go claim this power stone over here. And that is all he does in his round, is get himself lots of points. So then we have the Tomb King turn. The Tomb Kings, they have 1 unit remaining, and so those Tomb Swarms go and charge the Crypt Horrors in that building. But these are the Crypt Horrors that ate his Hierophant, so they are not concerned at all. The Horrors do take 1 wound, but then they just wipe out all the Swarms. Just tear them apart. That's it for the Swarms. Okay, well, the Tomb King player, he made it to turn 6. Looking at how bad his Hierophant got beat up in round 1, that's actually not too terrible, and he was not in a great position. He was getting attacked by powerful units from both me and the Orc and Goblin player, so he almost made it to the end of the game, but he gets killed off right here. So then it's my turn, and we kind of know how this is going to turn out, but I do have a couple of options that I can try and do. If I can kill off that 1 Goblin Big Boss with the Ruby Ring of Ruin, I might be able to prevent my opponent from scoring points over there, and I've got the Terrorgeist and Gaze of Nagash for that unit of squigs right on the other side. So the Terrorgeist goes, he's going to move to that Venom Thicket again, and he's going to take another wound, so that's kind of bummer. So now his scream is down a little bit. He still screams at the squigs, and he's going to kill 3 squigs and 1 herder. So then I go, the Ruby Ring of Ruin is dispelled, which is a bummer, and then I'm going to go and I'm target Gaze of Nagash on that last little goblin big boss, claiming that important power stone in the center, but the Tomb King player, again, is just messing with me on this. He plays the Triumph Treachery card, Misdirection, so he changes the target of the spell. So now I'm not targeting that goblin big boss, which I almost certainly would have just obliterated, but now he changes it to the giant Night Goblin unit, and so I blast that unit, and it doesn't matter. It's just a drop in the ocean. No panic test, no nothing like that. And that is the end of the game. So that was a big game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Triumph Treachery is always kind of crazy. So the Goblin player just ran away with it. He was making tons of points. He's claiming like most of the objectives at the end of the game, and so he kind of just walked away. That guy, that one player, I think he has won every Triumph and Treachery game that we've ever played. So yeah, I'm gonna have to talk to that Tomb Kings player about maybe joining forces against him next time. Anyway, I came in second, which is not bad. The vampire counts did really well during the campaign, but then again, it's a strong book. I kind of expected that they would do real well. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. I definitely think the terrain hindered a lot of us. Those Venom Thickets did a bad number on the Tomb Kings player and had to redirect the Goblin army for a while, but it may have actually helped him in the long run. He kind of, went forward to the Spined Horror, got a bunch of points, and then kind of just moved in and just gobbled up like all those objectives at the end. So it might have been okay, even though that might not have been what he originally wanted to do. Chariots had a lot of problems maneuvering around that terrain, and of course I just, I probably should have played more aggressively because I was kind of dithering around those buildings and I was having problems. I didn't really want to move the Terrorgeist into that swamp and just have it disappear. And I didn't really want to have it jump out in front of both of my opponent's armies either, because it can be a little bit vulnerable. But so in the end, it kind of just flapped around a little bit the edges and took a couple skeletons off, and that was more or less the end of it. I felt that my army was just maybe a round or two late. They were in good position. I hadn't lost a lot of stuff. If the game had gone on, 1 or 2 rounds more, I think I could have done really well. Not necessarily done real well against that giant Night Goblin unit. I don't know if there's much I could have done with that, to be honest. Once he went into the Tower of Blood, there were some possibilities. I did mess up a couple of things. I didn't necessarily pay for it, but there might have been a way to trap those guys in there for a while. As it was, they only got into combat with the Tomb Guard, who charged them in sort of a suicidal last stand. But yeah, neat. I think it had a lot of stories going on in this thing. And that's the end of the campaign. I really do like these escalation campaigns, these low point value kind of things. Let me know what you think. I'm going to wrap it up here. A little bit later, I might have sort of a review of my army, of the Vampire Count's army. Just show the units, tell them what I thought about how they performed in the game, what I would change, what I would do different, what I'm going to do next, that kind of thing. But that's a project for another day. I still do want to paint a couple extra things. I will let you go at this point. Thanks a lot for watching if you've watched this whole thing, and I will see you on the next one.